Congratulations! You've made it to level 3 of our Level Up Your Brioche virtual knit along. And now we're going to get to work on Andrea Mowry's Ramble Shawl. So this shawl is a combination of garter stitch and brioche herringbone. We're going to start by just going through the garter stitch portion, and I'll talk a little bit about the shaping techniques that we're going to use there. Then we're going to move into the brioche herringbone. This is our first time knitting brioche flat. So we'll start with the setup row and I'll help you get acquainted with some of the differences between knitting flat and knitting in the round. Then we'll take a close look at all of the increases and decreases required for this shawl. And then I'm gonna set you loose to finish this gorgeous project. So let's grab our yarn and needles and get started. All right, time to get started. So I've already made quite a bit of progress with my shawl, as you can see on the garter stitch part. I'm just going to show you the beginning of mine. So I just did a simple cable cast on here at the edge, and I found that that seems to have blended pretty well with the general situation. You can't even really tell where it is except when you look on the wrong side a little bit. So you use that primary color just for a few rows before we add the second color. I decided to do my project with Acadia, and I'm using Blueberry, which is this guy here, and Sea Lavender, which is the second color. So what I'm going to show you right now, most of the beginning of the shawl and the first half of the shawl is very straightforward shawl shaping with garter stitch. But for some of you who might be like a little unsure of how to like bring your yarn up the side so that you get like a nice clean look like what I've got here. What I did, so I just finished a wrong side row. So when I'm going to work the second color, what I do is I hold the color that I just worked in the front, and then I bring the second color up underneath it. So if I was going to start this, just let me bring my needle over. So I hold this in the front. Then I'm going to take the second color here, just get my needle behind. And then I just bring that around like so. And then that's what kind of tucks it in and gives it that nice clean edge. And then you just have to make sure that you do it the exact same way every time. And then what Andrea suggested is that you add a yarn over here. So this first yarn over is not part of your stitch count. It's just so that your edging here is nice and stretchy. So I'm going to add a yarn over, and then I'm going to do my knit two together. Comme ça. And that's how you start every right side row, and then you can just start knitting across. So when you come back around on the wrong side row, you're going to drop this yarn over off of the needle altogether. Okay, so I'm knitting across my row. I'm almost done. This is a right side row. And then when I get to the second last stitch here, this is where we do the knit front and back. So we decreased one stitch at the beginning to keep that in sort of a straight line, and then this is where we add the stitches to create that asymmetrical triangle. So we go as if we're going to knit, Then we go around the back of the same stitch and we knit in the back loop, and then we knit again into the front loop. So that way you've created 2 extra stitches, and one of those stitches has already been canceled out by the knit 2 together you did at the beginning of the row, and then you've just added 1 stitch for the whole row, and then we finish off. Okay, so I've been knitting across the wrong side on this row, and I just want to show you what we do with that yarn over that we added on the right side. So here it is, and this may seem counterintuitive, but all you do is just drop it off the needle, and that just makes that stitch at the beginning extra long and stretchy. And then that's how you get that really like stretchy, pliable edge on the beginning of your shawl. So I've been continuing to follow my pattern. I continued with the shawl shaping repeat rows of 1 to 4 until I had 116 stitches. Then I repeated row 1 and 2 once more and broke the main color. So at that point I had 117 stitches. And then I started the setup for the brioche herringbone. So I'm on the wrong side right now. So I just, I'm working with my contrast color. I just knit an entire row of knit stitches on the right side. And then on the wrong side is where I started setting up my brioche. So you can see here, like all of the other projects that we've done so far, we do 1 row where we either purl 1 or knit 1, depending whether you're on the wrong side or the right side, and then slip 1, yarn over. So this row was purl 1, slip 1, yarn over, purl 1, all the way to the end. So you should begin and end that wrong side row with a purl stitch, and then you see you've created all of your little slip stitches with the hats on them all the way across. So you continue with your brioche. So here's the really important part, and this is the major difference when we're knitting flat. So what we do is once we finish this wrong side row, instead of turning the work, so instead of turning this way and starting on this side, we're going to stay on that wrong side, and we're going to slip our stitches right back to the beginning. So this is why when you're knitting flat on brioche too, you pretty much always need to use either a double pointed needle or a circular needle, because you're always sliding those stitches back. So we've actually had to contend with this all along, but because we've been knitting in the round, we didn't actually notice that we've been working each of the rows 2 times across, because you're in the round, so you just keep going back and forth anyways. So when you're knitting flat, you have to knit each row twice. So once you go across the first time, you slide back to the beginning, then we go across again, and then we flip and then do the other side 2 times. So now that I've slid my wrong side stitches back to the beginning, so again I'm still on the wrong side, I'm going to do setup row 2B, and that's where we rejoin our second color back. So here we go. I'm just going to grab my ball here. So the first stitch is a slip stitch. So these slip stitches at the beginning of the row are always going to be purlwise because you don't want to reorient the stitch. You're just slipping the stitch to make a nice edge. And then all the way across row 2B, we're going to brioche knit, slip 1, yarn over until we get to the last 2 stitches. So I'm just going to hold my yarn in the back, and we're going to brioche knit that first one. So you should see that your first stitch is a different color because you slipped it. And then we're going to slip 1, yarn over, brioche knit, yarn to the front, slip 1, yarn over, brioche knit. So I'm going to do that all the way across until I get to 2 stitches from the end. So I've worked all the way across that row now, and we're at the last 2 stitches like the pattern says. So what we do now, just to end the row, is we do a brioche knit, we drop the main color in the back, and then we slip that next stitch so that you have that nice edge. And at this point we've worked that wrong side twice, so now it is okay for us to flip back over to the right side of our work. So we've worked both colors in the wrong side. I'm just going to grab my needle over here. So now we have to work the right side twice. We're going to do rows 1A and 1B, and we're going to start 1A using our contrast color. Now we're going to do row 1A using our contrast color. So I'm just going to make sure my yarn's positioned in the back, and our first move on the right side is just to knit that first stitch. Then we're going to do a slip 1, yarn over. Just make sure your yarn is secure there. And then we're going to do a brioche knit, slip 1, yarn over twice. So there's a brioche knit, slip 1, yarn over, brioche knit, slip 1, yarn over. And now we're in position to do our first right leaning decrease. So for that right leaning decrease, we're going to use the next 3 stitches on our left hand needle. So we're going to start by slipping that first stitch knitwise. We're going to knit the second stitch. Notice that my yarn is still in the front. And then we're going to slip that first one that we did over the second one. We're going to pass this stitch back over to the left hand needle, like so. And then we're going to slip the next stitch on the left hand needle over top. And then we just bring it back over so that we're in position to keep working. And there you go, you've got a right leaning decrease happening there. Our next move is a slip 1, yarn over, because we need to add our hat to the next stitch here. And then we should all be familiar with the brioche knit, yarn over brioche knit. So that's the brioche knit. We don't slip it off the stitch. We add another yarn over there, and then we knit into it again. And that gives us the little claw where we've increased 2 stitches. And then we slip 1 yarn over, brioche knit, and then slip 1 yarn over. So then we repeat this across the row. There's different instructions for the last 7 stitches, but instead of turning your work, we're going to slide our work back to the beginning. So I'm just going to work across the row, and then I'll show you how we're going to slide our work back. I've made it to the end of row 1A now. So like in the instructions, you continue repeating until you get to the last 7 stitches. And those last 7 stitches, you have a right leaning decrease, slip 1 yarn over, brioche yarn over brioche, the little claw, slip 1 yarn over, and then knit 1, and then we drop that color. So instead of turning, we're going to slide our way back to the beginning of the row. Let's get set up here. And now we're going to work across with the main color, which you should have still hanging out at the beginning of your row. So you might be like, oh no, my main color is 1 stitch in, and that's okay, because we're going to start by slipping that first stitch, and then you'll be in position to do the next stitch. So for this row, basically you follow your pattern, but it's just brioche purling across and working with the established pattern that we've already created. So we're gonna basically brioche purl everything that has a hat, and then do the slip 1 yarn over for everything that doesn't have a hat, just like we've done before with windrow and the skip hat. So we're gonna add our hat, brioche purl, and then it's a slightly different when you reach your increase stitch, just like with the windrow cowl. So here's my little claw. So we start, let's get those stitches over there. We start by doing the slip 1 yarn over, and then we have to purl that middle stitch, and then we slip 1 yarn over and brioche purl. So you just work this way all the way across that row. I've worked pretty much the whole way across row 1B. So this is the last brioche purl that I just did. So we're going to leave our yarn in the front, and then we're just going to slip that last stitch purlwise. So we've worked across row 1 twice, A and B, and now it's okay to turn and work the other side. So what we're going to do is we're going to work row 2A and 2B. And these 2 rows are worth memorizing, because all of your wrong side rows are going to be just a repeat of 2A and 2B. And really all it is just following along with the pattern established. So for 2A, you're going to do a brioche purl across, and then for 2B, you'll slide the stitches back to the beginning, and then using the main color you're going to do a brioche knit row across. So it's just like when you do a wrong side on a usual shawl, it's usually just maintaining the pattern. It's the same with this shawl, except you just have to keep your brioche rib going. Now that we finished rows 2A and 2B, we're going to start on row 3A, which is an increase row. And on this row, we're going to learn two things: the left leaning decrease, as well as a brioche increase that's going to be double the one that we already know, so that we can add an extra stitch at the end to maintain our shaping. So we start this row by knitting one with the contrast color. So we're gonna start by knitting one. We do a slip one, yarn over, and then we're in position to do our left leaning decrease. So this one is much less complicated actually than the right leaning. So we start by slipping that first stitch knitwise. So I'm gonna slip that knitwise. Then we just knit the next two stitches together. And then we slip that one back over top that we slipped knitwise at the beginning. So there you go. There you can see that gives you a left leaning decrease. So we're going to work across according to the pattern, and then I'll check back in with you once we're at the end and we need to do the brioche knit 4-stitch increase. I've made it to the end of row 3A, the increase row. So it tells you just to keep repeating till the last 9 stitches, and that's where I'm at right now. So we're going to do that left leaning decrease as the pattern says, slip knitwise, knit 2 stitches together, and then slip that first stitch back over top, like so. There's our left leaning decrease. So now we're going to slip one yarn over, brioche knit, slip one yarn over, and this is where we do our increase for the shawl shaping. So it's outlined as brioche knit 4-stitch increase in the glossary. So basically it's just like a brioche yarn over brioche, except you do it twice. And we're going to increase 2 stitches over the row, but 4 stitches into this stitch. So you do the brioche knit, yarn over, brioche knit, without slipping it off still. Then I do a yarn over, and then brioche knit through again. So instead of having that little 3-stitch claw, it's just a much bigger situation with 5 stitches. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then that's how you do the increase. So that's how you do the 4-stitch increase. Then we do a slip one, yarn over, a knit one, and then we drop our contrast color. And instead of turning our work, we slide back to the beginning to do the second color. And there we are. Now we're all ready to work across again in row 3B. So at this point, I've showed you everything you need to know to get this Ramble Shawl completed. We've gone through all the maneuvers, and now it's just time to follow Andrea's instructions and finish up your shawl. This is how it looks. I thought I would model my version for you. And here is my tip. So if you just remember that the first pass of every right side row, the brioche knit row on the right side, is where all the action happens. So all of your increases, all of your decreases, all of your shawl shaping happens on that row. So follow the pattern closely there, but all the other 3 passes, so the second pass of the right side and the first and second pass on the wrong side are all just working in the established pattern. So you just have to follow along with what you did on the right side row. And then that makes life just a little bit easier because you don't have your nose in the pattern the whole time, and it just makes your shawl a lot more enjoyable. So I just wanted to say thank you very much for joining me on this whole brioche journey. It's been a lot of fun working with you, and I really appreciate you supporting our shop during this time. And I hope to keep in touch with you. The virtual knit along group on Facebook is still going, so you're welcome to continue connecting with us there. And I hope this gave you all the tools to really dig into brioche and love this new technique. And in a little bit, I'll probably do a blog article, which I'll call Level 4 Brioche, which will have some of my suggestions for those of you who loved doing the Ramble Shawl and want to push yourselves even further with this new technique. So thanks again, and happy brioche.